Good morning, it's Tom Christie from Ashland, Nebraska, coming to you from my studio. And this morning I've been working on this hen mallard. This is the hen mallard that I carved in the how-to carving videos that I put on my YouTube channel. While I was working on that, it occurred to me it might be helpful for some people to have just a short video, how-to video on hen feathers in general and how to develop those. So I'm going to use this shoveler body and demonstrate very quickly how I go about painting hen feathers. I will have a full-blown how-to video, probably 50 minutes long, on how to paint a hen mallard from beginning to end. That will be available on my website, tomchristieart.com, for sale. But this is a freebie. Just how do you go about starting to paint hen feathers? I think a lot of people struggle with that, so let's get started on how I would go about that. Okay, before we start on the feathers themselves, I just want to talk briefly about base coating. I've got a mixture here of Liquitex heavy body acrylic burnt umber with some gesso and a little bit of black to tint it this gray color. And I use a brush to brush that on, and then a closed-celled just packing sponge to sponge a little bit of texture on the bird, and that lends itself to some of the dry brush techniques that I'm going to demonstrate in this hen feather. So I've already done that, and then I put a top coat over that of kind of a base brown color to get us started. And so now we'll begin to develop the feathers. And to do that, I use a chalk pencil. This is just a charcoal pencil you can get at Dick Blick's or any art supply store. And I'm going to use that to begin to just pencil in where I think some feathers are going to be as guidelines on a side pocket of a hen, let's say puddle duck. And I just need enough feathers here that I can demonstrate the technique. Okay, so we've got some guidelines. You can always erase the chalk pencil, which is a nice thing, and that's why I use it. Now I'm going to outline those just to kind of make those chalk line marks permanent, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've mixed a little light color with white gesso, raw sienna, and raw umber to give this kind of a tan, light tan look, and I'm going to use that, a watered down version of it, to kind of go over where I had those chalk lines and make them a little more permanent. Just giving myself a guideline at this point. I'm not going to worry too much about scale here or doing things super accurately. I just want to demonstrate technique more than anything in this video. Okay, so I've got some feathers established where I want to paint them in there. Now I'm going to use that tan color on a little chisel scrubber. It's like a 1/8 inch chisel scrubber. And I'm going to use that to follow these guidelines. I want to make sure you can see what I'm doing. And we want to start with that hard outline and just use the chisel scrubber to softly blend back into the center of the feather. And I'm going to do that on each one of these feathers. And let the paint kind of come off the brush. This is why the texture is helpful in this type of application of paint, where And I am mixing a little raw sienna in to give it a little more of a yellow or golden tint. And that texture I mentioned tends to pull the paint off the brush as I'm scrubbing. And then I flip the bird around and work on this side. Let me see if, yeah, you can still see that. Work on this side of the feather. Again, following that guideline and then softly blending out to the brown value in the middle of the feather. And you can go at this multiple times to build up the color concentration that you're looking for. I'm going to do this pretty fast since this is just a demo. And I will go ahead and do the same on each of these feathers and then come back. Okay, I worked those a little bit, and before I go on, let's talk about this brush. It's a Royal Crafter's Choice 1/8 inch chisel shaped 9160. These are very inexpensive brushes. You can get at Michael's or Hobby Lobby or places like that, kind of crafters brushes, but they have this golden Taklon bristle that is a synthetic bristle, and for the type of painting I do, they work really well. So now I'm going to take a little of this original value on the scrubber, not a lot of paint on the brush, and kind of go back in the opposite direction to soften that blend in the opposite direction. This is kind of a layering effect of painting. You can see this is kind of a hard line right here. I don't want a hard line there. I want a nice soft blend. So I'm taking the brown, very lightly scrubbing back in the other direction to soften the transition from light to dark there. The other thing that does is puts a little bit of color in there along with the blending it's doing when I'm using that brown shade going back in the opposite direction. You can see there I added a little raw sienna to that mix that time to give me a little more color. I'm going to do that on each one of these. Another thing to note, on a puddle duck hen, these markings are pretty wide along the side of the feathers, and they tend to narrow as they get closer to the tip. So I want to make sure I'm doing that. And if I've gone too far, I can take the brown and kind of go back out towards the tip. Here's another good example of pretty hard line here on this initial blend, and you can see by going back very lightly in the opposite direction with the darker value, kind of softens the look of that. Here's another hard line. I'm going to take the brown, go back the scrubber and lighten it, not all the way out to the edge, but just create a nice blend there. Same thing here. Now I'm going back with a little of that light value that we started with and just kind of cleaning up the edges again with this little scrubber that points up pretty good. Now, if I was doing a gunning decoy, you know, you can do as much detail as you want. You might just do 1, 2, and then the internal markings, call it good. It's a gunner, and that's all you need. I'm going to demonstrate as if I'm going to go ahead with some more detail on like a decorative smoothie decoy that you might have for the mantle. So I'm going to put a little more effort into this that I wouldn't put into a gunning decoy because it's not going to make that much difference out on the water. All right, now I've got a little chisel shaped, probably 1/4 inch wide scrubber, and I'm using a little lighter value of this base color. Basically, I've combined this tan outer color with this base color, wet mixed those together and made a little bit of a lighter version, and I'm going into the base of these feathers and lightening them a little bit. And I want to vary that depending on how much of the feather is showing. There's a lot of feather here, so you would tend to see some lightness as it goes towards the feather quill. And I'm using this little scrubber to blend then that color out as I go. So a little lighter at the base of the feather. I'm not going to do these or spend too much time on them, but you get the idea. Do this one down here, lightening and then blending, allowing that to blend back out to the darker value. Now I want to go back in the other direction and darken the tips of these feathers. And the result of this work is going to give these feathers a little bit of a sculpted look with the paint that we're putting on. All right, now I'm taking some burnt umber, going to the tip of the feather, and very softly scrubbing a darker value at the tip. I'm going to do that on each feather. And that darker value tends to run along the outside of the feather a little bit, but primarily is on the tip of the feather. Blending that out by lightening the pressure on the scrubber as I go back into the feather. So I don't want all this to be dark. I want to keep the light value as you go down towards the base of the feather. I'm doing this super quick, just for the demo purposes. You know, take your time on this and get a nice blend. You can't see much of this rear feather of the side pocket, but it's tucked in behind the others there. Darkening the tip, fading it out as you go forward. And this is that chisel scrubber again. This one is worn down a little bit more, but it's the same thing. Okay, I'm going to keep working those blends. You can see I need to blend more on this one in particular. Then we'll come back and put the internal markings in the feathers. Right now I'm just using a little chisel, probably 1/4 inch wide, and clear water, and just pulling that across those painted areas to blend things together a little bit better. Now I've got a detail brush. This is a number 4 King Art 9024 Max Round brush. And I've got some raw sienna blended with the original edge color to give us more of an ochre value. And I'm just going to go into each one of these and put an internal marking. And I like to vary the mix a little bit so that each feather is not exactly the same in terms of its mark and its color value. I think that adds some reality. On that one down there, I just put a little additional mark. Back here, you can't see much of the upper part of this mark, and it's going to tuck in the feather kind of like that. Here's a nice big feather. I'm going to go this way. I'm going to leave a little gap on this one and start it down here. Again, just going for variety in the look of these markings because they're not too consistent on a live bird. And then maybe I'll just tie these together like that. But you can see very quickly, we've got a pretty nice looking hen feather there now. Again, you can stop at that point or keep going, as much detail as you want. I think I'll go one more step and just put a few feather splits in here to show you how I would do that and how that adds to the look of the feather. And then we'll be done with the demo. Before I do those splits, I'm just taking the detail brush, going back and kind of cleaning up the edge lines, make them pop a little bit more. And an area like that where I brushed over, it just cleans it up. Like that. Now I've got straight burnt umber and on the detail brush, and I'm just going to add a few feather splits. It just adds some realism to the feather. Again, depending on how much detail you want. And to do a split, I'm starting pushing down, and then as you pull back, pull the brush off the surface. So that has the effect of making this a nice disappearing line down here, and that which is the shape of an actual feather split. You get the idea here. You can vary the color of these splits too, depending on what the underlying surface color is. But again, just for the demo, I'm gonna do a couple more and call that good. Put a few back there for good measure. So it just shows you kind of a quick way to get a nice hen puddle duck look to your feathers. And I may go in here too, depending on how much detail you want to add. Put a feather quill in there in some of these. Again, pulling in the opposite direction and pulling up at the tip, so gives us a nice sharp feather quill at the tip of the feather. All right, that was a quick demo, but hopefully that'll help as you're doing your own puddle duck painting. All right, hopefully that demo has been helpful and you might pick up some tips from that. I'm going to get back to painting my own hen puddle duck, this hen mallard that I'm working on. If these videos are helpful to you, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. That helps me out, and that way you get notification when I put up a new video like this. Until next time, good carving to all of you.